The envelope was still sitting on my kitchen counter when my son-in-law called to tell me the cruise was canceled. I remember looking at it, a thick, cream-colored envelope from Hargrove & Associates, the estate planning firm I'd used for 15 years. My wife, Pauline, had passed 8 months earlier, and I'd finally gotten around to updating the documents. Everything was in order. The house, the accounts, the investment portfolio she and I had built over 37 years of working, saving, saying no to things we wanted so we could say yes to what mattered. I set my coffee down and answered the phone. Dad. That's what Terrence called me. He'd been calling me Dad since the week he married my daughter, like the word was something he'd practiced. I wanted to let you know we're not going to be able to do the Mediterranean trip this fall. Things are a little tight right now. My daughter had mentioned a cruise to me 3 weeks earlier. She and Terrence were planning a 14-day trip through Italy, Greece, and Croatia. She'd shown me the brochure on her phone, the kind of ship that has 5 restaurants and a spa deck and room balconies that look out over waters so blue it doesn't look real. I hadn't asked how much it cost. I figured that was their business. Sorry to hear that, I said. Is everything okay? Terrence sighed. The kind of sigh that's a performance. It's just, with the renovation and Brennan's car, and honestly, Dad, the economy right now, we're stretched thin. Really thin. Bryn is my daughter. She didn't get on the phone. I told him I understood. I told him these things happen. I told him I hoped things would ease up for them soon. What I didn't say was that 6 weeks earlier, Bryn had called me crying. She said their furnace had gone out and they couldn't afford the repair. $2,200. I transferred it that afternoon. 3 weeks before that, it was Terrence's dental work. They were between plans, some gap in coverage, $4,500 out of pocket. I transferred that too. Before that, it was property taxes they hadn't budgeted for. Before that, it was a month of daycare for my granddaughter Rosie, while their regular arrangement fell through. I didn't keep count at first. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't keeping a running tally. I was just helping. That's what you do. Their family. I should tell you a little about myself so you understand where I'm coming from. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer. I retired 4 years ago, a little earlier than planned, when Pauline got her diagnosis. We wanted time together, and we used it well. We weren't wealthy people. We weren't poor either. We were the kind of people who clipped coupons when we were young and maxed out our retirement contributions when we could and paid off the house 12 years before we had to. We drove our cars until they became a liability. We took one real vacation a year, usually something modest, the Smokies or the coast of Maine, somewhere we could drive to. We had what we had because we made choices every single day for 4 decades. Pauline died in February. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from diagnosis. She was 64. After she was gone, I discovered very quickly that grief does something strange to your sense of time and obligation. I couldn't do much. Some days I couldn't do anything at all. But I could answer the phone when Bryn called. I could transfer money. It made me feel useful. It made me feel like I still had a role. That's the part I had to sit with later. I wasn't being generous out of abundance. I was filling a hole. The calls kept coming. Not every week, but regularly enough. Always with some version of the same story. Unexpected cost, bad timing. They hated to ask. Terrence always said they hated to ask. Bryn usually cried a little. I always said it was fine. I always said I was glad I could help. By the time Terrence called to cancel the Mediterranean cruise, I had transferred a total of $31,000 to their account in 8 months. I know the exact number because I finally sat down with my bank statements one evening in October and added it up. $31,000. I sat in my kitchen with the printouts spread across the table, and I didn't feel angry, not yet. I felt something colder than that, something more like clarity. My son, who I'll call by his name, Desmond, he lives in Portland, called me that same week. He'd heard through the family that Bryn and Terrence were having financial trouble. He was worried about me. We talked for 2 hours. He asked careful questions. He didn't push. But at the end of the conversation, he said, "Dad, just keep an eye on your accounts. That's all I'm asking." I told him I would. What I didn't tell Desmond was that Bryn had already called me the day before with a new ask. Not a request, exactly. More of a suggestion. She said she and Terrence had been talking, and with everything that had happened since Mom died, meaning Pauline, they thought it might make sense for me to think about liquidating one of my smaller investment accounts and moving the money somewhere more accessible. More accessible to who? I asked. There was a pause. To you, Dad, in case you need it. You're getting older and you're alone in that house, and we just want to make sure you're protected. I said I'd think about it. I got off the phone, and I sat very still in Pauline's reading chair. She had a particular chair in the corner of the living room that she always used, and I still call it hers, and I thought about the word protected. I thought about what it meant. I thought about who it was meant to serve. Then I did something I hadn't done in 40 years of marriage. I called a lawyer without telling my daughter first. His name is Charles Vaught. He's been practicing estate law in this city for 30 years. I'd used him when we updated our wills years back, but we hadn't spoken since. His assistant fit me in for a Thursday morning appointment. I brought my documents, my bank statements, a legal pad with notes I'd taken the night before. Charles is a calm man. He has the kind of face that doesn't react too quickly to things, which in his profession is probably useful. I laid everything out for him, the transfers, the calls, the suggestion about the investment account, the timeline. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you understand what you're describing?" I said I thought I did. He said, "I want to make sure we're speaking plainly. What you're describing is a pattern. Isolated, each of these requests looks like family in need. Together, they look like something else." I nodded. "Have you documented the requests? Kept the text messages, the voicemails?" I had, as it turned out. Not intentionally. I'm not the type to build a case against my own daughter. But I'd never deleted much on my phone. The texts were all there, the voicemails I'd saved because Pauline used to always say save everything. You never know. Charles helped me understand a few things that morning. He helped me understand what a financial power of attorney actually means and what it doesn't mean, and why I should be careful about who holds it. He helped me understand the difference between a gift and a pattern. He helped me update several documents. He helped me establish, clearly and legally, what my intentions were with my estate. I left his office 2 hours later with a folder of new paperwork and something I hadn't felt since before Pauline got sick. I felt like myself again. I want to be careful here about how I tell the next part, because Bryn is still my daughter, whatever happened, whatever she became caught up in. And I do think Terrence had more to do with the direction of this than she's ever admitted. She is still the person I taught to ride a bike in the parking lot of Grace Fellowship on a Saturday morning when she was 6 years old. She is still the one who slept on a cot next to her mother's hospital bed in February and held Pauline's hand at the end. That doesn't disappear. But love doesn't mean I have to be a fool. November came. I kept things quiet. I answered Bryn's calls, talked about Rosie and the weather and whether I was eating enough, and said nothing about Charles or the new documents or the thing I'd noticed with my accounts. Terrence reached out in early December with a new request. The biggest one yet. He asked if we could meet for lunch, just the two of us. We met at a steakhouse near his office, the kind of place where the portions are theatrical and nobody talks business before the entrees arrive. Terrence is good at small talk. He asked about my knee, which I'd had scoped in the summer. He asked about my friend Archie, who I played chess with on Tuesday mornings. He seemed relaxed and warm and interested. Then, after the waiter cleared our plates, he put his elbows on the table and leaned forward slightly. "Dad, I want to talk to you about something, and I want you to know this comes from a place of real care for you and for Bryn and for Rosie." I folded my hands in my lap and said, "Of course." What he proposed was this: a family investment. The way he framed it, it wasn't a loan or a gift. It was a partnership. He and Bryn would put their names on certain assets alongside mine, not to take anything, but to protect everything in the event of my incapacitation or death. It would simplify probate. It would protect the estate from taxation. It would ensure Rosie's future. He had clearly rehearsed this. He used words like liquidity and estate efficiency and generational wealth, with the fluency of someone who had spent time on YouTube learning the vocabulary. He wanted $120,000. He had a plan for it, a real estate partnership with a colleague, something with projected returns, a prospectus he'd printed out and tucked into a leather folder he'd brought to lunch. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. I kept my face neutral, the way Charles had been neutral with me. When Terence finished, I said, "That's a lot to consider. Let me think about it." He looked relieved. He said, "Of course, absolutely. Take all the time you need." He picked up the check without being asked, which was a first. I drove home and I made 2 phone calls, one to Charles, one to Desmond. Here's what I knew that Terence didn't know I knew. 3 weeks after he called to cancel the Mediterranean cruise, the one they couldn't afford, the one that was impossible because they were stretched so thin, my neighbor Archie's wife happened to mention, the way neighbors mention things, that she'd seen Bryn and Terence at the airport last month. She'd recognized them at the gate. She'd waved. She hadn't been sure they'd seen her. They were heading somewhere warm, she thought. She noticed Bryn was carrying a beach bag. Archie's wife meant nothing by it. She was just talking. I went home, and I did what I'd never done before. I opened Instagram. I'd made an account years ago at Desmond's insistence, and never used it. But I remembered Bryn's username. She used it for pictures of Rosie mostly. Her account was public. 3 weeks after the cruise was canceled for financial reasons, Bryn and Terence had spent 9 days in Turks and Caicos. There were 26 photographs. Crystal clear water. A swim-up bar. Terence holding a drink with a paper umbrella, laughing at something off-camera. Bryn in a wide-brimmed hat on the deck of what appeared to be a chartered boat. She'd captioned one of them, "Finally getting that reset we needed." I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time. I thought about the furnace, the dental work, the property taxes, the daycare gap, the month I'd transferred money 3 times in 30 days because every time I thought we were through the rough patch, something else came up. I thought about the word reset. I thought about my wife, who spent her last 14 months in waiting rooms and treatment centers, and who never once asked anyone for anything she hadn't earned. Then I closed Instagram, and I went to my desk and I got out a legal pad, and I wrote down, in the order I remembered them, every transfer I'd made since Pauline died. Dates, amounts, stated reasons, all of it. I'm not an emotional man. I was raised not to be, in that particular way men of my generation were raised, and I've never fully unlearned it. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I ate my dinner, I watched an hour of television, and I went to sleep. What I did in the weeks that followed was quiet and methodical. I worked with Charles to finalize everything I needed to finalize. I moved certain accounts. I updated beneficiary designations. I drafted a letter, not angry, not accusatory, just factual, that laid out the transfers, the dates, and my understanding of what had happened. I had Charles review it. Then I waited for Terence to follow up about the $120,000. He called on a Tuesday. He asked if I'd had time to think things over. I told him I had. I asked if he and Bryn could come to the house on Saturday afternoon. I said I wanted to talk it through in person. They arrived at 2 o'clock. Terence was wearing the kind of casual clothes that project success. Dark jeans, a good jacket. Bryn brought Rosie, which I was grateful for. Rosie is 4, and she has Pauline's eyes, and she ran to me at the door and grabbed my hands and pulled me toward the backyard because she wanted to see if the bird feeder I'd put up in October had any birds. We stood at the back window and looked for a while. A pair of cardinals. Bryn stood next to me and put her head on my shoulder, the way she used to when she was small. I think about that moment sometimes. I still don't fully know what was calculation and what was real. We sat down at the dining room table. I'd made coffee. There was a folder on the table, which I didn't open right away. Terence probably thought it was his prospectus, the real estate documentation he'd printed. He'd brought his copy in the leather folder again. I let him go through his summary. He was polished. He'd clearly prepared. He talked about timing and opportunity, and how a decision now would position the family for the next decade. He said, "the family," several times, by which I understood he meant himself. When he finished, I opened my folder. I took out the letter Charles and I had drafted. I also took out the bank statements, 2 pages, highlighted. "Before we talk about any of this," I said, "I want to walk through something with you both." Bryn looked at the papers. She didn't move. I read the transfers aloud. Not all of them, there were too many. But the highlights: February 8th, 2200 for the furnace. February 27th, 4500 for dental. March 15th, 3800 for property taxes. And so on through October, $31,400 in 8 months. I set the papers down. "I'm glad I was able to help," I said. "I want you to know that." Neither of them said anything. And I also want to say, I saw the photos from Turks and Caicos. The silence that followed was different from the silence before it. Bryn's face changed, not dramatically. She's controlled. She's always been controlled. But something went out of it. Terrence reached for his coffee cup and put it down without drinking. "That was," Bryn started. "I'm not asking you to explain it," I said. "I'm not here to have a fight. I want you to understand where I am." I took out the second document from the folder, a summary prepared by Charles of the changes I'd made to my estate documents over the past 6 weeks. Not the documents themselves, just a summary. A clear and factual accounting of what I'd decided and why. "My estate is in order," I said. "Everything has been updated. Charles has copies of everything." Terrence looked at the summary. I watched his eyes move across the page. "Dad," Bryn said, and her voice had a different quality now, careful and soft. The kind of soft that's a tool. "We're not trying to take advantage of you. We love you. We're worried about you. You're alone in this house, and I know you worry about me," I said. "I appreciate that." I picked up the prospectus he'd brought, the leather-bound folder with the real estate partnership proposal inside, and I set it on the table between us. "I'm not going to be part of this investment." Terrence looked like he was calculating something behind his eyes. "Dad, if you just look at the numbers." "I've looked at the numbers," I said. "My numbers, and I've made my decisions." I looked at Bryn. She was looking at the table. "I love you," I told her. "I love Rosie. I want to be part of your life, and I want to be at birthday parties and holiday dinners and all of it. That doesn't change. But I'm not a bank account, and I won't be approached like one." The room was quiet. Terrence picked up his folder. His jaw was set. He said very evenly, "I think we need some time to process this." I said that seemed reasonable. They left 20 minutes later. Bryn hugged me at the door, and it lasted a beat longer than usual, and I couldn't tell what was in it, whether it was guilt or grief or habit. Rosie had fallen asleep on the living room couch, and Terrence carried her out to the car. I went back to the dining room, and I collected the papers, and I put them in their folder, and I stood there for a minute in the quiet of a house that used to have 2 people in it. Here's what I want to say about what came after, because there was an after, and it matters. Terrence didn't call me again for 6 weeks. Bryn called twice, both times brief and surface level. The kind of calls where you report facts. "Rosie has a cold. We're repainting the kitchen," without getting close to anything real. I understood it. I let it be what it was. But in February, exactly 1 year after Pauline died, Bryn showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. Alone. No Terrence. She was holding a container of the coffee cake I'd always liked from the bakery near her house. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. She sat down at the kitchen table and she didn't make small talk. "I owe you an apology," she said. I got out 2 plates and cut us each a piece of coffee cake and sat down across from her and waited. She said a lot of things in the next hour. Some of them surprised me, and some of them didn't. She said she hadn't known about all the requests Terrence had made. She'd known about some, but not the shape of it, not the total. When I'd read the list of transfers aloud at the table that Saturday in December, she said, It was the first time she'd understood the full picture. She said it made her sick. I listened. I didn't rush to forgive her or to reassure her. I think that was the right call. I think she needed to sit in what she was saying. She said the Turks and Caicos trip had been Terrence's idea, planned and paid for without her understanding exactly how it fit into everything else. She said she'd been asking questions since December. She said things were difficult between them. I didn't ask for details. That's their marriage, and I have no place in the middle of it. What I said was this: I don't know what happens between you and Terrence. That's for you to figure out. But I need you to know that I'm your father, and that doesn't come with a price tag. I'll always love you, but I need you to love me back the same way, she cried. Not the careful crying she'd sometimes done on the phone when she was asking for something. The other kind. I put my hand over hers on the table. I thought about Pauline. I thought about what she would have done, sitting here in this kitchen. I think she would have done exactly what I did. Waited. Listened. Not offered more than was asked for. That was always her wisdom, and I was always the one who talked too much. Desmond came to visit in March. The three of us, Brennan, Desmond, and I, had dinner together at the house for the first time since the funeral. Terrence wasn't there. No one addressed that directly. Rosie sat next to me and ate approximately 4 bites of everything, and then spent the rest of the meal telling me about a frog she'd seen in a puddle outside her school. I laughed more than I had in a year. After the kids left and the house was quiet again, I sat in Pauline's chair and I looked at the envelope from Hargrove and Associates that was still on my bookshelf. I'd never quite put it away. Maybe I'd left it there on purpose, as a reminder of what I'd almost let happen, of what I'd managed to see clearly, barely in time. My estate is still in order. The documents still say what I decided they should say. I talk to Charles once a year now, just to check in. I talk to Desmond every Sunday. Bryn and I are finding our way back to something. Slowly, carefully, like two people on ice learning to trust it holds. I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a house that still smells, faintly, like the lavender lotion Pauline kept on her nightstand. I have a bird feeder in the backyard that the cardinals use every morning. I play chess on Tuesdays. I eat dinner at 6. And I keep the records. Not because I'm suspicious of everyone. Not because I've hardened. But because Pauline was right about that too. Save everything. You never know.